Dobar dan svima i dobrodošli na digitalnu Sinergiju 21. Moje ime je Jovan Milosavljević i ja ću danas biti moderator Room 1 tracka. Drago mi je što ja imam priliku da vas pozdravim. Agendu prikazanu na ekranu ste imali prilike da vidite na stranici konferencije i u međuvremenu nije bilo drugih izmena. Uz predviđenu satnicu i jednu pauzu od 15 minuta nakon svakog predavanja očekujemo da ovaj blok sesija ukupno traje do nekih 5 i 15 dana. Kao i uvek, imat ćemo elokventne govornike, prezentacije će biti na srpskom i na engleskom jeziku, zavisi od prezentacije do prezentacije, a shodno tome i deo naše današnje komunikacije. Molim vas da bez oklevanja koristite opciju chat prozora za sva pitanja, nejasnoće i komentare koje budete imali tokom sesije. Pitanja ćemo pročitati tokom ili na kraju prezentacije. Budite slobodni da iskoristite ikonicu podignute šake u Teams okruženju, da se prijavite za reč i diskusiju, moći ćete da uključite svoj mikrofon. Vaše aktivno učešće bit će zaista pozdravljeno i zahvalni smo vam na tome. Trenutno najavljujem prezentaciju Software Development Myth of Value koju će držati Sergej Kešelj. Upravo ćemo da je pustimo. Sergej, zamolit ću te da podeliš ekran i možemo da krećemo polako.
Thanks again for joining me today, and I'll just use this opportunity to present a little bit about who I am, what I do in iCode Factory, and a little bit about iCode Factory from the perspective of my responsibilities only, before we move to this subject. And subject is really around what is value and what we are delivering, what is our personal value from the professional perspective, of course. So in different roles, what we think about the value and how do we cope with the value. So first things first, my name is Sergej. I am software engineer by soul, and I'm also Microsoft certified trainer for the last 15 years. I have some academic background, 2 different masters in information systems and electrical and computer engineering. And as some of you may know, I'm also a CEO and founder of a company called iCode Factory. So my background is strongly technical, and I am involved in software development processes from the day one until today, and it will stay like that. So my current responsibilities are starting from solutions architecture, where I'm helping teams and our partners to make technical decisions. I am also helping internally and externally to teams to kind of drive technology change and drive a strategy when it comes to technology, what kind of a technology to choose. I'm often involved in architectural boards in different projects, and I'm kind of have really great overview over different projects in company and externally, because I'm also Microsoft certified trainer, and I deliver a lot of Azure training and Azure DevOps training. Also recently started delivering some Microsoft 365 development related training. All these trainings are Microsoft official curriculum training, so material is built by Microsoft. And it is very interesting to see how Microsoft have evolved and how this training is covering not only technical skills, especially for the Azure DevOps, but also, let's say, it's some sort of a culture change you can see in Microsoft and how they are managing their projects when you go through the Azure DevOps training. So also I have a few things now and there to do as a CEO, not very exciting, but someone has to do it. Luckily, there are a lot of really smart people here in iCode Factory taking responsibilities for me in regard that. So to move on, agenda for today is to briefly speak about software development. I think this is really important to start with. So what is software development, and when you are building software product, what you are actually doing. This is more experience-based observation than something I read about. But I kind of feel from my gut that this is the right way to look at this. And also from the perspective of what I have lived through the iCode Factory organization, is that we are helping a lot of companies, including enterprises, to go to production. And we are in production in some really, really significant names like Fujitsu, for example, or Volkswagen or T-Systems. So there are some really big names, global names, where we help directly to these companies or through partnerships with other companies in mostly in Europe. So this is how we cooperate with TDM systems as well. So then I would like to just discuss some terms like what is the value, how to cope with responsibility, and what are the challenges of introducing a change. All right. And I don't want to go into any kind of definition of all these things or whatsoever. I would just like to share a few stories I've been involved into. And then at the end, I'll speak about new waves in software development processes and how these new approaches, which is not that new, but statistically, when you look at the current state of processes in software development in companies, it is still new for a lot of companies in regard if it is implemented or applied. So let's start with the software development. Often when we think about software development, we may say that it is like building some engineering discipline. You know, you are building some bridge. So you plan for a bridge, how to make it, and then you just create small pieces, and then you join pieces, and at the end you have your product finished. The problem with this way of thinking is that we are not sure what kind of a bridge we would like to build. We are only sure that main feature of this bridge will be to pass the river, but I'm not sure how wide this bridge is going to be, what kind of a materials. I would like to change materials during the process. As I close to the end of the building this project, I may decide to add some additional floor, additional track, change some materials. You know, there are a lot of changes on the way. And this is a lot different than other engineering disciplines. And when you go back in time, we can all remember that decades ago, when we have started building software, we really tried to set requirements for everything there. Like, you know, well-known waterfall model. So you agree about the requirements, and then you start with it, and then at the end you evolve end users and say, this is your bridge. But they say, we wanted to go on horses there. We don't need those whatever asphalt things. So the problem is that you learn a lot during the process. And how I look at the software development process at the moment is that it is more like a series of experiments, like science, where you are you know that you would like to cross the river, but you are experimenting with different materials, with different sizes, with different ways of designing these things. Then you even go with the agile methodologies, you go to production with some experiments as well. And then you pick up the telemetries from the production, you pick up responses from end users, and you see, this little feature I have experimented with works good, but maybe if I tweak it a little bit, then I'll have a better result. So it looks like software development is more close to the scientific experimenting in series and measuring results and trying to find the best way to do something, compared to the traditional engineering where you have to plan everything up front and get the results. So for today, I would like to start with something called value. So what is the value of what we are doing now? Why we have gathered and formed this organization? and what we are delivering. So what's the value we have? And value is really big question for business, and it is hard to answer. So you may try to guess what may be some of the values for different roles in software product development. Let's be more specific. So let's start with something really simple. Let's start with computer science student. All right, so you are a student and you are working on an assignment in the team, and then you have to explain to professor or to some assistant there what you have coded. You have to demonstrate a little bit first. So you show the demo. Like if you click here, 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 there, and there, and this is the end result of my algorithm and everything works. Typically, you will actually implement something called happy path. So if you try to, put some value of some text instead of some number or whatever, everything will break. But from the perspective of computer science student, typically that is kind of a good enough. So value for me is that this is working teacher. I understand how I have implemented it, and I can explain to my teacher why I have done it that way. However, as a student, I will never create some logging framework that will log activities in production. That doesn't have any value. So if you ask senior developers what's value, you will get a range of answers, like learning new technology, working on a cool project. Value for me is working on a challenging project, but sometimes to have time where it is not challenging. Or if you ask product owners, I would like to have feature deployed on, or let's ask sales managers. I would like to have feature as I promised it and on time when I promised it to my end users. And I will also, value for me is to achieve target of selling enough licenses. So you can go further and further and see that values for different participants may be different. So let me share you a story. Back in 2009, we went to the CeBIT fair. I think the CeBIT doesn't exist anymore. Nevertheless, we went to Hanover, Germany, to the CeBIT, and together with our partners, we have made a research, conjoint analysis on skills. So our partner is a company from Germany. They used to be a startup back in, 15 years ago or something. And they are in knowledge management and skills for IT management business, where they are building software that helps companies to manage knowledge of their employees. And they are really interesting organization. They have some of the co-founders. One of the co-founders is actually professor at the university in Vienna. And this guy is very interested in machine learning and all these different, the science guy. And we have even made a scientific paper from this investigation we had. And what we have done is experiment is like this. We have created small application. Application generates two random CVs, person A CV and person B CV with skills. We had different skills like technical skills, domain skills, soft skills, these different types of skills. And then we just randomly generated person A and person B with random skill levels. So like in this example, generated person A have C# at level 4, WPF at level 3, and person B has C# at level 3 and WPF at level 4. So then we went to the CeBIT and we asked decision makers and decision supporters to tell us which person they would like to employ. So we had hand device, and then decision maker will just choose person A or person B. We will regenerate a couple of iterations, so everyone will just click a couple of times and select from two persons 10 times or 20 times. At the end, we had gathered a lot of inputs. And it is interesting that when we have all this data, then you can scientifically, through the simple mathematics, figure out which skill is the most important for decision makers and decision supporters. So me being a software engineer by soul, I, of course, thought that it will be some hot technical skill, but actually it was domain knowledge. So business valued domain knowledge over technical knowledge. And it was kind of a surprise for me. But, well, now I'm thinking in a different direction. And for me, that's also very important. It gives a lot of value. Factory is software development services business. So for us, technical skills are still very important. But for production companies, domain skills are probably more important. So this is very interesting that value looks differently for different roles and different participants in the process. All right, that's one of the stories. Let's move on from value to the responsibility. So responsibility, this is an interesting subject. Everyone wants responsibility. Everyone wants to take responsibility in one case. If I know the outcome up front, and if I know the reward, it will be easy for me to take responsibility. So I'll just jump in and grab it. All right. For any other case, I will try to figure out what is the reward for the responsibility I am taking. And this is responsibility is really, really, I would say, interesting subject. But let's get into an example. Let's say you have a team of two persons. One of them is software developer, engineer, and the other one is quality assurance tester. So they work together on a small software. Developer creates feature, test it a little bit, then move it to the QA tester. Tester has some test plans, test scenarios, run through it, and then it goes to production by some operations whatsoever. You don't care about it. This is pretty much traditional approach. So you don't care about operations at least. So someone else will do it, some system engineers or whatsoever. So that goes to production. And at the end user side, there is a bug. So something doesn't work. Okay, it happens. It happens to Microsoft, Google. It happens to the best. So it may happen to us. Maybe a big deal. Usually it's not. But the question here is, whose responsibility is this bug? So if this is something that I, as a software engineer, should oversee and just take care so that I don't have it at all, or it is something that slips through the quality assurance process. And it is really hard to answer that question. So we may say that it is shared responsibility. All right. But shared responsibility is really, really problematic, because if responsibility is shared, then it is easy to transform that shared responsibility into no responsibility. All right. And we can really play around this mind game unless we are building, for example, critical software system. So if our software has to control installing device, nuclear plant, rocket, space rocket, then shared responsibility is really a problem. Because if I cause someone to go blind because of the bug that goes to the installing device control, and if I may say that we are normal persons, then both software engineer and quality assurance testers will have trouble sleeping after that incident. So there is really, for these critical software systems, there is really a process of how to design these critical software systems, where you have, failovers, you have tests that are having particularly high % of test coverage. Every software has countable number of states. So by the definition, mathematically, you can prove that you can cover 100% of cases, but it is maybe number of states your system may be in is so high that you cannot achieve it in reasonable time and effort. So nevertheless, this is really putting some philosophical question on shared responsibility. And I would like to kind of let us all think what we can do with shared responsibility and how to remove any instance of shared responsibility so that we can really focus on what is important. Because if you have incidents with shared responsibility, then software developer in this case will really have trouble to build new feature and to deploy new feature because there will be a fear of making mistakes. And also quality assurance tester will have a lot of trouble because there will be a fear of making mistakes. And if we fear of making mistakes, then we get kind of a freeze, and it is hard for us to think and go through the process and do it in a better way. So I will get back to this shared responsibility later. So let's introduce the last term, and the last point here is change. So everyone wants to change, or everyone wants to see the change. But when we have to change ourselves and our behaviors and our thinking, especially our beliefs, then it is very, very hard. You cannot change person's belief, but you can change person's behavior. For example, this is used by big brands. So let's get into some simple scenario. Coca-Cola versus Pepsi. So if you are Coke guy, you will never buy Pepsi, even if it tastes better. And this is why companies like Pepsi will go outside to the city center and give you a free shot of Pepsi. So you cannot change your belief that Coke is a lot better than Pepsi. At the end, they are both really nasty drink. You don't have to drink it at all, just avoid it. But nevertheless, if you have belief that Coke is the right thing, you won't try Pepsi. But if you try Pepsi, a lot of times you may eventually change your belief. That's the kind of a theory I'm putting there, or something I have read about. All right. So let me tell you a little story about Ford Motors. Years ago, I've been hired as a consultant, and maybe some of you will recognize the place. This is close to the cathedral in Bonn, downtown in Germany, where I had worked with a couple of consultants from Serbia, and we've been helping a company to create a lot of new features in existing project in order to be prepared for a demo for Ford Motors. So a big customer, and we are building a solution for automotive car industry, for parts dealers or something like that. Doesn't matter. I remember a couple of things from that specific consulting job. And one of the things is that we have worked ourselves like crazy. And for a month, all of us in the team, external consultants, have delivered around 300 hours in that month. It was September, I remember well. Back in 2000, I don't know, 6, 7, something like that, I cannot recall. We've been working in a company 5 days a week, then the rest of the time in the hotel rooms, over the weekend in the hotel rooms. And only once, one Sunday afternoon, we went out of the hotel to the down center in Bonn. And this is where I made this picture. So that's one of the things. The other thing I remember is that this is the first time I have seen continuous integration, build server, and test-driven development in practice. So I read about it. It was not that new. It is from the end of 90s, beginning of 2000, 21st century. Well, it was 20 years ago. Anyway, I really like the practice because we've been able to completely, break apart and then fix it in a better way in a month. A lot of external, really good consultants. So I have learned a lot from some of these guys. And at the end, demo went really well, and Ford Motors have bought licenses for this software, and they are still working with different automotive industries, including Ford Motors. Nevertheless, I really like the idea and I went back to the iCode factory, and I really wanted to implement continuous integration. So back at that moment, I didn't know any company in the city of Novi Sad, where we have development center. No company had continuous integration at all. We were in early stages. Some companies have shared code even through emails, so with customers. So at the moment, we had a version control server, and we worked with customers from Europe. And I wanted to implement continuous integration and set up build server in iCode Factory so that we can help on a project we've been involved together with our partner, also from Germany, and the same guy from CeBIT. And I spoke with the owner there. This guy is actually one of the kind of minds behind that software we are building together, and a really very, very smart dude, broad knowledge, a lot of experience about different, the guy that understands business and people and processes, and also he's software developer as well. So, really, really interesting kind of a guy. And I spoke to him, I've been in Germany and working on this consulting project, and there we have used a build server, and that really helped, because when you commit code to the central server, if you forget something, build server will just pull it and try to build it, compile it, and if it breaks, it will just send an email, and you will know immediately, and that will help us to work, because otherwise I have to ping you on some Microsoft Messenger or whatever the tool was. And then you have to send whatever. And guy have asked me how much time I need to set up that. I said, I was optimistic, like a day, maybe two. And he told me, we don't have time. I have a demo, really important. Let's focus on features, whatever. So, all these business demos, software development teams, whatever, struggle. So I let it go. And, we've just focused on some other things. But it really, I felt that this is the right thing to do. So on some second iteration where we spoke about some other things, I mentioned continuous integration and build server I would like to set again. And the guy also kind of told me, we don't have time at server. So I said, okay, this is not going to work. I set after a working day, I set and on my computer in the afternoon, I have spent, I don't know, 6-7 hours. I have set build server on my development machine, not even on a server. And tomorrow morning, I kept working on the project. So as soon as someone commits something that breaks the build, I'm the one to know that immediately in a minute. And then I just send message on Messenger, you forgot this file, you forgot to add parameter in method, you forgot to add method whatsoever. And after a couple of, very quick reactions from me, that guy came to me and asked me, how do you know immediately that something is wrong? And I said, I have build server set up. And he said, what's build server? So the guy really didn't even listen to me when we were in discussion how build server may help us. So the point here is that introducing change is often really, really hard. And you will typically get a huge list of reasons why we cannot do it now, why there is no time. But in regard time, there is no we need more, there is no I don't have enough time, because everyone have the same amount of time. It is only about priorities. And sometimes to introduce change, you have to work it on your own. This is not the right way, of course, especially in established organizations, but you should at least try to find enough supporters to try to show to others how the change you are going to introduce will help them. And then, we the people, it is from physics. We would like to do and have some results with the least possible energy involved, or spent. So if I see someone having better time by having some build server or whatsoever, I would say, oh, I want build server in my team as well. So speaking about continuous integration, I'd like to move to another experience I had. So Microsoft has a software development center in Serbia for years, and they are developing some really interesting features like handwriting recognition or parts of the Microsoft SQL Server, and especially in last couple of years, they are developing features for Azure, mostly Microsoft SQL Server as a service in Azure. So naturally, I know a lot of guys there in Microsoft. I delivered some training for Microsoft partners as well. I've been a speaker at the conferences organized by Microsoft. So I know a lot of people there. And also I'm personally involved with some people because I've been a best man for one of the premium field engineers in Microsoft. Also, you know a lot of people, and country is not that big. And if you are a Microsoft partner, and we know each other. So I spoke with one of the software engineers a couple of years ago about the process they have there. And what they have in Microsoft is that as a software engineer, you have something they call DevOps as a service. So as a software engineer, you are responsible for your code all the way to production and including production as well. That's really interesting. When you are building new feature is always set on feature switch. Feature switch by default is set to off, and it should have zero impact on deployments. So on production. So you will naturally run or create as a developer a lot of unit tests, integration tests, end-to-end tests, performance tests, load tests, all these other things. You will push code and merge into the appropriate branch. Processes will trigger, and there will be a lot of so-called gates. So you will have automation on security tests, on load tests, even on licensing. So what kind of libraries you are using, and what's the license of this library, and if that library may be used in Microsoft product. This is really interesting. So that's automated. So ask yourself, who is responsible in your project to upgrade library you are using in your project? Typically, that's shared responsibility. So what they do in this organization in Microsoft is that no one is responsible for licensing, and no one is responsible for updating of libraries. Instead of that, there is a gate in build process that will trigger and say, this library is not up to date, or this and build is broken, or this library has security issue, and I'm not allowing this build to pass gate, and I'm going to break the build. Or code coverage is below 90%, and I'm going to break the build. Or there is some possible SQL injection in this code, I'm going to break the build. So instead of having shared responsibility between people, you have automated processes that will just remove those shared responsibilities from people completely. Because if you build a lot of tests that will have 100% coverage, you just push it, you don't have to care really about bugs on these features at all. So there is a new wave of processes in software development. And a lot of these findings insights I got from my experience with preparing and delivering Azure DevOps training for the first time. And it was some years ago, and I am in Azure really from the beginning, even from the time when they had Azure portal in Silverlight. So a long time I worked with Microsoft Cloud, with Azure, and with DevOps as well. And the first time I took the material from Microsoft to prepare for the Azure DevOps training, I was really surprised by the amount of material focused on process and culture of DevOps, not on the tool, not on the Azure DevOps as a tool, but on the processes and what has to be done to improve organizations and to be able to deliver value to end users through the automation of these processes. And then I dig into it. This was really interesting for me to figure out why we feel that pain of going to production. Why we have that, production team is developing something and then there is some management, sales, product owner part of the team. They are promising something to end users, and then there is like executives. There is a promise to execute and deliver something to end users, stakeholders, owners, whatever. And why is that pressure building up between development teams and some other teams? And it's kind of a simple, because the problem is in operations. Because as a software development team, you would like to build feature and you would like to be sure that feature will not break anything. And we have kind of a lot of fear there. And because of that, we tend to postpone the deployment dates. And on the other side, business feels a lot of fear from not delivering on time. So business will push a lot of pressure there. And then as a development team will say, we need more time. And then business will say, we have a lot of pressure from end users. Would you put additional feature there as well? And then it never ends. So this is really something that triggers my attention. So I read LinkedIn Emerging Jobs reports on 2020. And it's interesting that now on number 5, with 34% of annual growth, there is a higher and higher need for site reliability engineers. So this is a term made by Google. And these are the guys, kind of a DevOps engineers, guys that are helping that operations are working well, but in a way that they are automating everything. So there should not be any manual process in operations as well. And the idea is to really, maybe even in the future, I don't know how bold is this kind of guess, maybe the futures will not have ops at all. Because when you look at the Azure serverless functions, when you look how you build function, you can deploy it automatically and it will be scaled globally automatically. So maybe in the future, with a little bit help of artificial intelligence, machine learning, Azure or cloud technologies, and all these continuous automation and gates and all these other technologies, complete deployment will be automated without any human configuration stuff. Because maybe we'll have systems that are smart enough to move something to production automatically and to test a lot of things automatically as well. Nevertheless, site reliability engineers, according to Ben Fraynor, one of the guys that originally have overseen the development of this role, is what happens when you ask software engineers to design operations. So software engineers tend to automate things because we don't want to do things manual. This is why we are actually in software development as well. So I don't want to run deployment by manually pushing something into production. I would rather create some script that will do it for me. So another report financed by Google and created by external agency called Dora, State of the DevOps report. This is from 2020 as well. They have measured 4 key metrics in different organizations, a lot of organizations worldwide. They had measured lead time. This is the time from when you commit your code until your code is in production. Then they have measured the change fail. So when you change something and you push to production and then you have to roll back as well. Also, they had measured deployment frequency, so how often you deploy, and time to restore from change fail. And the findings they have is that number of companies practicing DevOps grows steadily. So, and that also elite performance numbers are growing even more. So there is a lot of high performance. Some of them transfer into the elite performance, and some of them get back to the medium performance. And they have measured all these metrics previously said, and then at the end, they had just compared elite performance with other organizations. So elite performing organizations and teams are deploying more than 200 times often than other organizations, than median organizations. So you go below 50 and above 50% of organizations. Then more than 100 times faster lead time. So from the moment you commit until it goes to production, they are 100 times faster. And time to recovery is even faster. It's astonishing because everything is automated. You have incident in production, you get into the incident, fix it, push it, it goes through the process immediately and goes to production to the appropriate deployment strategies. So there is no, in DevOps, there are no servers like that are up and running all the time and you just don't touch it. In true DevOps, you are recreating servers as well. So everything is in code and all the configurations and everything else, so that once you push it, production environment will be recreated, like new virtual machines or containers, and then it will replace existing production. So this is really interesting report. All these reports are publicly available, and you can just get to them on the internet and just read through the more details. Also, the Puppet company that is creating some of the DevOps tools have delivered their own report every year, and their report leads to something called DevOps as a self-service. So the idea is that development team shouldn't really ask anyone outside of the team to be able to go to production. So there should be enough self-services from the operations perspective that you can just go to production as a production development team anytime you like. And Puppet has its own DevOps evolution model where organization should evolve from different stages up to the self-service DevOps, so that you can go to production without really any external wait for other silo in your organization to do something for you. So it's really interesting when we get back to the value to just figure out what the value may be. So this stays big question, and I would like to emphasize that once again, that for software development person, it may be to work on something challenging but also relax, to have people with greater knowledge, to have people I can educate, many different things. For product owner, it may be make customer decision makers happy, catch deadlines. For sales engineer, reach my targets, have feature I have promised on time. For the executives, a lot of range of creating revenue, response to changes in the externally improve organization. And for the end user, value is that I get feature that works in a way that I can take care of my main business. So for my end user, I really don't care what is the technology you use, what is the organization you have. I really care about if this feature is solving my business problem so that I can focus on my main problem. And my main problem is not your software. If your software is my main problem, then you have a big problem. So there isn't something that maybe we should think about, how we can become more product-focused organizations, how we can have every person value to intersect with end user value, where we have working feature. And one of the tools that may help us is to have DevOps. Because once I know that I have a code and I push the code to main branch, and that code will end up in production in an hour, tomorrow morning, every Friday, whatever the setup of my DevOps is, but automatically. On the other side, if I feel safe because there are some automated tests, there is appropriate coverage, there are some additional gates that will check my licenses up to security issues in my libraries, well-known OAuth-based security, code, static code analysis, all these different things. And once it is in production, if I will have a feedback loop which is very important, so that I can get kind of how many likes my feature has from end users, how many users are using it, what are the performances, are there any exceptions there. Then when that information flows back to the development team, I will have more understanding of end user values, and my personal professional values will at least intersect with end user values, and everything will click natively. Also, all the responsibilities, especially the shared ones, like you know the story with software engineer, QA tester, and all these things, all these responsibilities should be removed from the team so that there is no fear of going to production fast. And I think that we should at least sit down and think through how this may evolve in the future, because all I have investigated so far and all I have lived so far is telling me that this is not a trend. This is something that will evolve over time, but it is something that organizations will really adopt. And this is why we see a lot of DevOps engineer roles in job ads as well, because all organizations would like to deliver to production fast. Why? Because end users are now getting used to have fast response from organizations. So end users are getting used to that every now and then you will have some update. Personally, you know, when I open Facebook, LinkedIn, whatsoever, there are some changes really, really fast. Azure, for example, there is deployment continuously. So all the time, new features are deployed to Azure automatically. There is no, you know, update Friday or whatsoever. It continuously goes to production through the DevOps as a service all the time. So that will be all from me for today. We have some time left. So yeah, I hope this will arise some questions and that it wasn't really too much of information you haven't expected. And I think that now we can really move to the questions, I guess.
Hvala, Sergej. U principu malo smo prešli planirano vreme, pa bih zamolio sve interesente koji imaju bilo kakva pitanja da se obrate direktno samom Sergeju. On je ostavio u chatu svoje kontakt podatke, informacije gde možete vidjeti i kako ga možete kontaktirati. Ja bih vam se za sada zahvalio. Sergej, tebi hvala puno na učestvovanju. Hvala svima na pažnji i na izdvojenom vremenu.